This week on the Hollywood and Toto podcast, well, the left went too far even for Stephen Colbert. And thank goodness we had the Daily Show to rush in and prove, hey, we can be crazy too. And we talked to author, investor, and philanthropist Paul Hutchinson about his amazing new book, The Sound of Freedom, true stories that inspired the film. Inspired is the key word here. You've got to hear what he went through, his amazing life story, and how he's inspiring others to do something good for humankind. It is just remarkable.
Welcome to the Hollywood and Toto Podcast. Entertainment news and reviews without the woke Hollywood narrative. Free speech, free expression. Now that's entertainment. And here's your host, award-winning film critic, Christian Toto.
Well, we finally got a break from the mourning, the gnashing, and the wailing over Stephen Colbert's cancellation at The Late Show.
The worst news ever.
Let's call it Sweeney Gate. Yes, as you may know by now, actress Sydney Sweeney appeared in an ad for jeans, and she used a little wordplay with jeans, the things you wear on your legs, and of course, jeans, the building blocks of your body. Of course, that was mildly witty. Of course, the joke here is that she's got wonderful genes because she's a very attractive young woman, but that really caused a kerfuffle on the left. They went, well, crazy.
I feel like I'm losing my mind.
Now, when I say crazy, I mean lots of people on TikTok and social media melting down over the ad, crying it's about white supremacy, it's about eugenics, it's about white women and how they are the sort of the ultimate form of beauty. No, it's an ad for jeans featuring a pretty girl who happens to be an actress and happens to have ample curves. That's really all it is. But of course, that's not the way our society embraced it. And when I say our society and the left, I mean a lot of people on social media who are on the left, but also the mainstream media. They didn't do themselves any favors in their coverage of it. But I want to point out one particular story. This was an op-ed in where else? MSNBC, that really captures where this story is going. Sydney Sweeney's ad shows an unbridled cultural shift toward whiteness. Not The Onion, not The Bee, MSNBC. Getting harder and harder to delineate those sources now, isn't it?
Well, your situations are virtually identical.
Now, if you were paying attention to the culture, you know this is exactly where this conversation would go, which is mostly sad. But the fact that I think the people on the side of sanity are winning the conversation, and the fact that American Eagle did not buckle. They basically told people who didn't like the ad to go pound sand. My words, not theirs, but same kind of message applies. That's why you know woke is on the run. That's why you know that this is a winning issue for just most Americans. And by most Americans, that includes the White House. The White House put out a statement about this. Also, Vice President J.D. Vance mocked the whole controversy on the Great Ruthless podcast.
My political advice to the Democrats is continue to tell everybody who thinks Sydney Sweeney is attractive is a Nazi. that appears to be their actual strategy. I mean,
so, that's the voices we need to hear to kind of take these kind of situations, say, tisk, it's really not worth anything, not worth discussing, and certainly not worth rushing out the whole white supremacy, Nazi, you know the drill. And the left was in overreach mode because who actually complained about this? None other than the soon-to-be canceled Stephen Colbert. Now, listen, Stephen Colbert of the Late Show fame didn't exactly rush into the situation and mock it for all it's worth, but he did basically kind of hit the brakes and say, hey, my fellow leftists, maybe this is not the hill you want to die on. Here's what he said. Now, some people look at this and they're seeing something sinister, saying that the jeans denim wordplay in an ad featuring a white blonde woman means American Eagle could be promoting eugenics, white supremacy, and Nazi propaganda. That might be a bit of an overreaction, although Hitler did briefly model for Mein Kampf for fit jeans. Oh, those writers, all 20 of them, they're not getting paid enough, if you ask me. Now, again, when you've lost Stephen Colbert, you've got a problem. And to be critical of Stephen Colbert, he should have dug in much, much harder into this issue. He just skated across it, trying to let people know that, hey, this is even too crazy for me. But that's why we have The Daily Show. The Daily Show rushed in with guest host. I guess she's part of the rotating selection of hosts, Desi Lydic. And of course, she pounced and seized on the story, as well she should. It's a funny story, lots of comic material here, except she missed the punchline. She missed the silliness of it all. She missed the fact that people are getting outraged over literally nothing. And instead of poking fun at the people who melted down on social media and elsewhere, she decided to attack the conservatives who were mocking the situation.
Anyway, but then there was another reaction online, which is that the ad wasn't just selling jeans. It was also subtly promoting white supremacy. And as you can imagine, that spawned an incredible right-wing backlash.
What these left-wingers don't know is that they are revealing themselves to be the actual racists here, racist against white people.
They're mad because she's young, hot, healthy, white, and blonde.
Liberals they just hate hot people. They just do.
Yeah, that's a great point.
It's a great point. It's a great point. I thought they just hated meat and freedom, but they also hate hot people. They do.
Actually reminded me of Saturday Night Live a few months back. There was that whole thing where a Republican on the Hill was chastising those 3 Ivy League school presidents because they were basically condoning anti-Semitism on their college campuses. It was an incredible thing to watch. And when SNL got to it, instead of making fun of the Ivy League presidents who were tisking Jew hatred, they made fun of the Republican representative because, well, it's what they do. They can't even think outside the box. This is the same thing. In reality, both Leidick and Colbert miss so many easy comic layups. There's so much material you could do here. You can just play some of the people melting down on social media and then just arch an eyebrow or just give a smirk. You don't have to write a single word. It does the comedy for you. It's all the heavy lifting has already been done. But they couldn't do that. Colbert barely lifted an eyebrow. And of course, Leidick just said, hey, look at that. They're funny for reacting to this insane situation. But that's the way late night comedy rolls these days. And to be fair, it can't die quickly enough. And I think the hosts themselves are shoveling a little dirt on top of the particular grave. But there is one exception this week I do want to mention, and it's Jimmy Fallon. Now, I think one of the least reported stories around these days is that Jimmy Fallon was gifted The Tonight Show. I mean, he's a very funny guy. He was on SNL. Not that he didn't deserve the gig, but he's driven it into the ground. The Tonight Show for years and years was the top-rated show on late-night TV. Johnny Carson, Jay Leno, they were at the top of the heap. They stayed that way for decades. They gave it Jimmy Fallon, and what happened? He now trails Colbert. He now trails Greg Gutfeld on Fox News. He now trails Jimmy Kimmel over at ABC. And when I say trails, I mean by a lot and consistently.
How about the guy who comes in last place?
There may have been a night or two where his ratings perk up a bit, but look at the ratings week after week, month after month. He's in 3rd or 4th place, no matter how you want to kind of put Gutfeld's show in there, because it is on 10 o'clock, not on 11:30. But it's a disaster. It's an absolute disaster. And I guess they're making enough money to keep the lights on, but probably barely. But that's a story for another day. But I bring up Fallon because he did something interesting this week. He agreed to talk to Greg Gutfeld, the king of late night, on his show, on The Tonight Show. So Greg Gutfeld on Thursday will appear as a guest on The Tonight Show. Now, this is a very ordinary story. Greg Gutfeld is a rising star. People on Fox News love him. His profile has been rising in recent years. He does great on late night TV, and he's quick and he's smart and he's funny. Well, why wouldn't you have him, I guess, a guest on your show? That's kind of a no-brainer. But Greg is on the right. He's kind of libertarian right, I guess you could say. And that's a no-no on these late night shows. And there's some recent studies showing how each of these shows basically just invites liberal people on there when there's a political bias. I mean, all these shows have celebrity guests. That's, neutral in theory. But when it comes to people with an actual political bent, it's always liberals, always, always. I think the Late Show had on Liz Cheney, and she's as rhino can be, and she was the lone Republican in that survey. So you get the drift. Now, it's smart on Fallon's part because he's going to get a lot of attention. He might get some blowback. He might get some ratings from it. That's the whole point of this. Also, if you're right of center and you've quit The Tonight Show because it's so left-leaning, and it is, maybe you want to give it a watch that night. I'd actually, if I'm up at that time, I'd check it out. I'd be curious to see how that interplay goes. And of course, Greg's always funny, so it's certainly worth a watch. But what's interesting there is that, Fallon tried this a couple of years ago, and it didn't work out so well for him. At least he thinks so. Of course, talking about when Donald Trump appeared on The Tonight Show, 2016, heat of the election cycle, and they had a nice conversation, and Jimmy Fallon famously or infamously tousled Donald Trump's hair to show that, yeah, it looks weird and we don't know what's behind it and what is involved in making it poof up like that, but it's real, it's his. And the left and the media, and I repeat myself, they melted down. They melted down so badly that Jimmy Fallon had to apologize for having a major guest on his show and humanizing him, as they said. Amazing, and just amazing. And as I've tracked at Hollywood and Toto, ever since then, that show, The Tonight Show, has been left-leaning religiously. Now, it's not as cutting and cruel and one-sided as The Late Show or A Late Night with Seth Meyers or even Jimmy Kimmel Live, but it is an aggressively left-leaning show. No doubt about it.
Albert, these people are right-wing conservatives.
So Jimmy Fallon bent the knee. He had a conservative guest on, and he paid the price in a way. Now he's doing it again. But of course, desperate times call for desperate measures. The Tonight Show's ratings are bad. Late Night's in trouble. The format is dying. And I think it's just about rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. This ship will sink. It will sink sooner than later. But let's try something different. So kudos to Jimmy Fallon for even trying that. Again, he is less mean-spirited than his competition, but he's going to get some flack for this for sure. And that's a little bit of a risk on his end because all the people in his circle, well, they don't like Greg Gutfeld at all. So we'll have to see how the ratings go. If this helps out The Tonight Show, if this is an olive branch to the right, maybe Jimmy Fallon has seen the error of his ways. Maybe he's going to do a real, true Johnny Carson-esque Tonight Show for his remaining years. It would be nice. It'd be unexpected, but don't hold your breath. Late night TV is dying. Fallon will go. Kimmel will go sooner than later. And sadly, even though I once loved this format, good riddance. I often joke online about some sort of microscopic form of heroism. I say, not all heroes wear capes. It's a common phrase. I'm not the only one who uses it, but just a quippy line. But, when you bump into a real hero, someone who does something extraordinary again and again and again, I don't know, the phrase comes to mind and it seems wildly inconsequential because there are real heroes out there. And sometimes they share what they've gone through with the world in really profound ways. And that certainly describes our next guest, Paul Hutchinson. He is an investor, a philanthropist, a business guru. And at one point in his life, he realized that not only did he want to do more with his life, but also he was starting to learn about some of the atrocities going on in the globe. And I speak specifically of child sex trafficking. It's a subject so horrific, it's hard to even wrap your brain around it. But he got involved in exposing and freeing kids from these horrible situations. And he risked his life in doing so again and again and again. And he captured these stories, these remarkable stories in his new book, The Sound of Freedom, True Stories That Inspired the Film. And it recalls all the remarkable adventures he had over the last 10 or so years to help free these children from these incredibly horrible situations, and collected some amazing stories. He pays tribute to the people he worked with. He pays tribute to the kids who just suffered so much and were able to kind of have a new lease on life. And also about how all those experiences led the way to his involvement with the film Sound of Freedom. And what's maybe the most amazing thing about the film is that it almost never hit theaters. Of course, we know it sat on the shelf for multiple years. The Disney Corporation owned it, but were not willing to put it out there. Only when Angel Studios came along did they revive the project. And then, of course, it became a massive hit. And I have to say, for the last couple of years, I was so curious as to the why. Why did it sit on the shelf? Why did the media react the way it did to the film? I mean, the legacy media's coverage of Sound of Freedom was nothing short of abysmal. I mean, just morally warped. We talk about that here as well. We share so much about the film, about some of the inspiration behind it. In a way, this particular conversation doesn't really capture the full flavor of the book because the book is mostly about his adventures and about what he went through, with a smaller part about Sound of Freedom, the movie. But I wanted to focus on that because this is an entertainment show, and that's where my focus generally is. So I strongly recommend you get the Sound of Freedom book, of course. It's just a great read, and it is wildly inspiring. But also we get into the nitty-gritty of why this movie struggled to get to the marketplace, what happened when it went there, and also what Paul is working on next to kind of push this forward and again, use popular culture to send the message out and get the awareness out of the horrors of child sex trafficking. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I certainly had a great time talking to him. I was inspired reading the book, hearing what he had to say, learning what he's gone through. It's just an amazing saga. But it also does point to what I've been saying for years, decades even. Pop culture matters. More people know about this now because of the Sound of Freedom movie. If that movie didn't exist, many, many people wouldn't have given this a second thought. And that movie had real world consequences in many ways, not just about awareness. We get into that too. So I hope you enjoyed my chat with Paul Hutchinson. What a person. He definitely deserves to be wearing a cape. He's done some amazing things, and I hope you enjoy the conversation. Paul, welcome to the show. So many incredible stories in your book. And I think this interview will be a little bit different, that I'm really focusing on the film, pop culture in general, getting your message out to the masses, because it's so important. You've been so critical in that, not just incredible work you did to help children, but I think getting that out there is so important as well. But talk briefly about the power of pop culture. I mean, you were signing on early to the Sound of Freedom film, knowing how it mattered, knowing how there were a few ways better than getting a message out than a film, than a pop culture title. So I want to start there. And why is that important? It may sound like an obvious, almost dumb question, because of course it is important, but just from your perspective, why was it so paramount to you throughout this whole
Christian,
journey?
Understand this, back at the time of slavery in the U.S., before Abraham Lincoln, it wasn't people like me. I've led or played a key part in over 70 undercover child rescue missions in 15 countries, and I've seen the darkest part of humanity. But back at the time of Abraham Lincoln, it wasn't the guys rescuing the slaves that created the biggest difference. It was actually people like you. It was, the podcasters. They didn't have podcasts back then, but it was people like Harriet Beecher Stowe, who wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin, which was the media, the pop culture of the age, as authors. And so, in fact, years later, when Abraham Lincoln met Harriet, he shook her hand. He says, "So you're the little lady that wrote the book that started the big war," right? So on that rescue mission in Colombia, it was one of the largest child rescue missions in history. 124 children in one day, and it was an eye opener for most of us as operators, and we realized that we couldn't take millions of people to see what we had seen. That would be dangerous. However, we could help millions of people feel what we had felt. And but the problem is negotiating the twists and turns in the whole Hollywood machine, as it were. We went into me and one of the Homeland Security agents went into Sony, Lionsgate, Paramount. They were actually really interested in the story. However, they wanted full literary control. They could have changed the story however they wanted. And with us knowing what they could or could not do with it, we were just uncomfortable with that. They could have literally put me and one of the Navy SEALs in a situation with one of the children that didn't exist, that puts us in, and sadly, the narrative that is being pushed by Hollywood, by big media, that narrative is not in line with the conservative values that you and I are putting our words and our lives out there for. We're helping the world see that this slow digression into a lack of a moral compass is not healthy for the family or our country. And so we decided we needed to go private, and I was the primary investor.
I think on the surface, listen, I cover culture wars, I cover left versus right. I understand sort of that landscape, but on the surface, the thought of doing a story about exposing the horrors of child sex trafficking seems incredibly apolitical, incredibly unifying. You know what I mean? I mean, just on the paper.
Absolutely.
What, and we'll get into this more about the media coverage as well after the film came out, but what is the objection there to what you're trying to share? Because it doesn't seem political. It doesn't seem cultural. It just seems like, good gosh, this is a horror going on in the world. We need to expose it and we need to stop it. I mean, that's a very naive point of view maybe I'm having, but explain that a little bit. Because I can't quite square that.
Well, honestly, it's still perplexing to me.
Yeah.
It really is. There's if we can argue all day long about save the trees, save the wells, what countries should be taxed and tariffed in this way. What we can there's so many different opinions on so many political issues. There should never be a group of people who are for child trafficking anywhere. It doesn't matter the rich, the poor, the different cultures, the different skin colors, the different religions, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Children are not for sale. And so this was something that in the beginning, I remember flying to Thailand with Glenn Beck. And this is one of the deep conversations we had, is that this is something that can really unify America. This is something that can bring all of us together. This isn't something that there's a line. In fact, what's sad is that the border wall issue should have never been a political issue. This is a human trafficking issue. And we could go deep into that as well, but absolutely, this is the one thing that we can all agree on and should be the unifying thing. Sadly, there are people that tried to take The Sound of Freedom and make it a political thing, saying that it was a religious film. It wasn't a religious film. The only references to God was when Bill Camp said, when God tells you to do something, you listen, you don't hesitate. And when Jim Caviezel says that God's children are not for sale. Outside of that, those two lines, and we get buried as a religious film.
So okay, I appreciate that. I just wanted to kind of jump in there because I really want that fleshed out. So you've lived these amazing stories. You've risked your life. You've done so much to help children. On paper, incredible story. You get the screenplay together. The project comes together. You get Jim Caviezel, a great actor. Now, I know part of the lore behind this movie is that, and maybe you can kind of clarify things. I think your book doesn't go into the great detail here, but I want maybe you can. That the movie sat on a shelf for several years. Then Angel Studios came along. Is that a correct narrative? Is there anything you can share about that? Because the fact that it was such a good movie and the fact that it was such an explosive hit is an incredible Hollywood story in and of itself. But is there more to that story? Was it just that Disney didn't understand how to market it? What was that kind of process?
No, it was we and you are exactly right. We had finished everything on Sound of Freedom 5 years before we got distribution. Okay. So the rest of the story is this: we did a lot of the filming in Colombia, and Fox International played a big role in that, and they were providing some of the actors and some of the financing as part of that. As part of that agreement, they had the international distribution rights to the film. Well, then Disney, after we finished filming and before it was finished editing, then Disney bought out Fox and had no interest whatsoever of distributing the film. And so that got locked up for a couple of years. We had to go through some legal stuff, some financial stuff to be able to buy out that agreement with them. And then it gets locked up again by a former Disney executive who convinced some of the producers that he was going to raise $20 million. He says, well, those guys just kind of have their own agendas. I can help you, and locked it up again. By the time it got free from that, we were already a couple years into it. By then, we went into Amazon and Netflix. We got turned down everywhere. At that point, I thought, you know what? That was a waste of money. I was the first investor in the film as well as the executive producer. I thought, well, this is. I tried. I wanted to create an impact. I wanted to create this awareness, and it's just not going to happen. I thought for a while, am I the only guy who thinks this is a good movie, right? Because everybody was turning us down. But here's the thing: Netflix, who turns down Sound of Freedom, is the same company that brings us Cuties, right? This series about 10-year-olds dressed up as strippers. Are you kidding me? Yeah. Right? And so here's something important. Here's some narrative behind the scenes stuff that a lot of people don't know. So Angel Studios, the studio that finally garnered the support of good conservative people everywhere who said, you know what? No, we're going to get behind this movement. If you go back in history, many, many years back, a predecessor company to Angel Studios got sued by Hollywood. Why did they get sued? They got sued because they had created a piece of hardware, like a DVD player, and a piece of software going with it that allowed you and I, as good parents, to filter what was coming into our homes. What it would do is we could take a rated R movie that was we wanted to watch with our kids, but we wanted to cut out the vulgarity and the nudity and the blasphemy or whatever it is, and we could literally turn a little switch and turn those things down to make it a PG or even a G, and then watch it. Well, Hollywood did not want you and I to have the ability to filter what was coming into our own homes. And so they got sued for giving us that tool. So that should tell you everything right there as to what the objective is in Hollywood. And so then, of course, when we decided, okay, the only way that we're going to do this right is we have to take it to the people, by the people. And by the people meaning good people everywhere on social media that were pushing out this story of the Sound of Freedom that was coming out.
Yeah. And I know Angel Studios is expert at that sort of relationship with the audience, connecting with consumers. They do it better than almost anyone. Just a quick backpedal. When you were getting rejected, and listen, sometimes there are great films that do get rejected. There, I'm sure Stephen King has stories about being rejected by publishers when early in his career. I mean, the arts, it's a common story, but were there any sort of consistent themes from when you got rejected by a Netflix or an Amazon? Did they say it's too X or too Y or just not for us? And did anything emerge in that regard?
They didn't feel like the general public would be open to watching a film about trafficking. That was what their excuse was.
Gotcha. And there is a kernel of truth that, because this is really tough subject matter. And I mean, I think you can make an argument there that this is, but there's also many films that cover really challenging subject matter that people enjoy and watch and share. Obviously the film comes out, it's a massive hit. As you mentioned in the book, it was outgrossing, I think, Mission Impossible, I think the Indiana Jones sequel, an unbridled success. After all that waiting, after having lived through these adventures, after risking your life, after saving all these kids, just to see that response, I can't even imagine what you were thinking at the time. What can you bring us back to that experience? I
would simply say gratitude. I had got to the point, as did some of the other operators and people involved, of thinking, it's dead in the water. It's going to be an act of God for this to come out and make the impact that we wanted it to. And so when it became the #1 independent film in the world, and hundreds of millions of dollars in the box office and et cetera, more than the money, though, the thing that I was most grateful for is the fact that over 70 million people saw The Sound of Freedom, and hundreds of millions of children are safer now because of the awareness with so many parents of really what's going on in the world. And that's why we go so much deeper in the book as to giving parents tools that they need to keep their kids safe. So many people leave the movie Sound of Freedom and they're like, oh, I want to go do something. I want to help. The worst thing you can do is go to Mexico and try to go undercover and rescue kids. You're going to get arrested. You're probably going to get shot. Yeah. The best thing you can do is go home and hug your children and have some healthy conversations with them that we can talk about here. We go through in detail on the book of things that we can do every day to make the world a safer place for our children.
Yeah, it's one of the most amazing parts of the book is that whole segment just describing, it starts with hug your children, but it's also warning signs that maybe your child is struggling, but also the fact that what I've learned over the years is that, I'm not a psychologist by any stretch, but damaged people, I feel like the bad villains of the world seek out people who are struggling, who are damaged. They tend to have this weird radar for people who are vulnerable and don't have the sort of the emotional strength. It's one of the just terrible things about our world. And for parents who are thinking about buying the Sound of Freedom book, for that alone, it's amazing. And also, just a quick aside, you talk earlier in the book about you've had a lot of enormous success on a financial level, obviously, but how you kind of didn't put that first. You put helping others first, and how things flowed from there is a beautiful part of this book. We can't get into it here. This is more of a Hollywood themed podcast, but I just wanted to mention that as well.
Thank you. It's really, this is a spiritual war, Christian. Yeah. This is, and I don't want to get into religion here, but Ephesians 6:12 is everything. This is not a battle of flesh and bones. This is a battle against principalities of darkness in the highest places. That's really what this is about. And so, if we're going to win it, we have to be solid in that space
and acknowledge the evil that's out there. One of the things that I cover media bias, I cover it in the Hollywood realm. Nothing should shock me in this regard. And yet I followed closely the media's reaction to Sound of Freedom's release, to its success. And I was stunned. I was just stunned. The vitriol, the anger, the way that the stories were framed, the way that the media went out of its way to attack people. I think Rolling Stone mocked some audience members who were watching your film because they were older and they had white hair. And I just thought, my gosh, what was your reaction? I know the success was amazing. That's what matters. But what was your response to seeing the media's narrative about your film?
It solidified my my assumption that they had an agenda. Mm-hmm. In the beginning, when we were getting turned away for 5 years, we thought, well, they know more about the people than us. They obviously have a reasons for not wanting to take the film. Mm-hmm. But when it came out, and all of a sudden we were a smash hit. I mean, we were beating out Indiana Jones, mm-hmm. Temple of Doom. Mission Impossible. We did the impossible mission by beating out Mission Impossible in the beginning. Yeah. But even then, the media was slanting. In fact, most people never heard of Sound of Freedom unless they were on some of the social media networks with some of the conservative people out there, because mainstream media didn't mention it at all. Even in the Oscars, we were not mentioned. We were the #1 independent film in the world in the last 10, 20 years, and we weren't not mentioned not once. So it tells you absolutely there's an agenda there that is not in line with the conservative values that we hold.
Yeah, I thought, no offense to Jim Caviezel, who's great. I thought Bill Camp should have got a Best Supporting nod or nomination.
Sure.
He was sensational. Sure. You talked about the awareness before that the movie brings that is very consequential, that people maybe just were unaware of what was happening in the world, how common it is, how frightening it is. Can you talk about what other the fallout from the movie? I thought I had read a year or so ago, maybe even some legislation that was named Sound of Freedom. This is your obviously area of expertise. What other, repercussions from the movie, the positive things that happened beyond the awareness factor?
Well, I will say most of our work, and our foundation is the Child Liberation Foundation, and most of our work is outside the U.S., particularly in Latin America. My wife was a famous Colombian actress and very connected there. And because of that, the movie created a positive uproar from good people throughout all of Latin America saying, do something. And we've spent a lot of time lately in Colombia. Colombia was kind of the epicenter of change for me in my first undercover mission. Mm-hmm. It was kind of the epicenter of change in terms of awareness for the world, because we filmed most of the movie there. So we thought, what better place than Colombia to start as the epicenter of real change in fixing this problem? And if you flew in just 3 years ago into Medellin, Colombia, you would see prostitution, all kinds of crap going on everywhere there. Well, the mayor there in that city, along with a lot of other political figures, have got behind some major changes in legislation to keep the kids safe. A lot of certification programs are being implemented that are being pushed by government agencies, certifying that anybody working in hospitality, anybody working in healthcare, so that they can know what to look for and identify those victims. So I believe, as I said earlier, hundreds of millions of children are safer now, not just because of the awareness, but because that awareness has pushed to make some significant changes. Now, in the U.S., there hasn't been a lot of political changes. We were pushing with a lot of those things beforehand. In fact, over the last 10 years, something that was super interesting. 10 years ago, if an American went to Thailand and did something horrific with a 12-year-old in Thailand, he would have to be punished under Thai law unless we could prove that he made the decision to go to Thailand, made the decision to do that while on U.S. soil.
Wow.
One of the laws that was changed, which was just fantastic, was no longer do you have to prove that he made that decision. If you can simply prove that he did that in Thailand, you've broken U.S. law anywhere in the world, which is great because, if you went and robbed a bank in Thailand, you can't be punished in Thailand and in the U.S. But you go hurt a child there, then you can be punished in both countries. After one sentence is done, as soon as you go to the other one, boom, you start your next sentence.
This is all from one movie. I know there's so much work that you've done. You're the sort of the unsung heroes that you talk about so much in the book. Just as one movie, look what it did. It's just amazing. Can you maybe point to other films or documentaries that have covered similar subjects that you could just give it kind of a quick shout out to? I don't know if any come to mind right now, but I just like to kind of, spread the word about maybe other projects that listen.
City of Dreams
is
a great one. City of Dreams just came out recently, and there's actually a bigger problem in the U.S. with kids that are brought in thinking that they're going to, like in that movie, thinking that they're going to be on a soccer team, but really then they get brought into a sweatshop or underage labor. So there's a huge percentage of people in slavery, as part of the human trafficking numbers that are in forced labor situations, and so that sheds a light on that, even beyond the light that we shed in The Sound of Freedom with sex trafficking, et cetera.
When you think about pop culture and making a mark, you could take the idea behind Sound of Freedom, which is a stunning story. There's so much there, and make a poor film, and make a film that doesn't sway the masses, that doesn't sort of illuminate the issue. I mean, great filmmakers make bad movies. Great actors make bad movies. This is not your space per se, but obviously it is now. What have you learned about the process behind the whole film? What were there sort of maybe the secret sauce behind its success? I mean, and there's a lot of individual things, the director, the screenplay, the actors and all, but I just feel like so many times great intentions and great ideas don't translate, but obviously everything worked with Sound of Freedom. What do you think were some of the key issues beyond the obvious, beyond the, the script was kind of thing?
So, when we were 10, 11 years ago, we were around talking to Sony, Lionsgate. We were trying to find the right team with the right heart. That was really the key with this. This was a delicate subject, so we needed somebody who knew how to handle a delicate subject. And I was at a Grammys after party in Los Angeles. It was called the Rock Against Child Trafficking, and Pierce Brosnan was there. I got to spend some time with Pierce and the former president of Mexico. And at that party was a guy by the name of Eduardo Verástegui. Now, Eduardo, plays, he's a producer now of Sound of Freedom, but that's where I first met him. And as we sat there and talked, we talked about the rescue mission stuff when I found out he was a producer, and he goes, "Hermano, we need to turn this into a movie." I'm like, "Yeah, I think we do. If you know anybody." He goes, "Well, that's what we do." And I'm like, "I've never even heard of you." But he said, "Well, why don't you do this? Why don't you come to this preview of this film that we just finished?" And this film was called Little Boy. And it's an incredible film, delicately handling the subject of faith in a non-religious way, but in a very much heart-centered, God-centered way. And they did such a beautiful job in the Little Boy film that at the end of it, I'm like, I need to meet the director. And the director was Alejandro Monteverde. And what an incredible man. Alejandro is really the magic behind this whole thing. It's none of us as operators, none of the stories, none of the producers. Alejandro was the magic. And I saw that magic watching Little Boy and how delicately he handled that and just brought that story to life. And so when we shared that story with Alejandro, what was amazing there, he was already in the middle of writing a script, a fictitious script about child trafficking. This was already a passion of his. And so when he heard the real story of some child rescue missions, it called to his heart. It was divine guidance that brought us together. And sadly, he had some family losses right in the middle. A father and a brother that were taken by some very bad people in Mexico, and he lost some family members, and it took him offline for a number of months, and we thought we were going to lose him in terms of his involvement, but he came back with vengeance. Why? Because he was so passionate about fighting evil that he knew he could use his gifts in being able to create something that would create a movement. So I think those things together, somebody who was already in that right heart space and could handle a delicate subject in a way that could just bring light was the reason why it was successful. So I give all the credit to Alejandro.
Yeah, and although you expand on that story in the book, it's just fascinating. It's like almost like you need a movie to cover it, but of course now you've got a book to do just that. Now, before I let you go, are there any more pop culture avenues beyond your new book that you may work on regarding this subject? I mean, isn't it you can share in that regard?
Absolutely. In fact, we're working with a friend of ours who's a producer at Telemundo and Univision, a Latino producer who has a new movie that my wife is being cast in as well, that we are working with the final script. These are true stories. We're bringing in true stories, and then we're bringing in the action because of the fact that I've been there on the ground on some of these, and putting together, just like we did with Sound of Freedom, putting together 5 or 6 different operations together into one film. And we have a lot of people that have come to us and say, hey, I want to do something with some of your undercover missions. I really believe that the world has got what they needed to with Sound of Freedom. The awareness is already there. Now we need to teach them what to do next. What does that look like? What does healing humanity look like? Because, going and rescuing children, in reality, we're fighting fire with fire, right? And when you fight fire with fire, something already got burned. And in this case, it's the children, right? And how do we back that up? How do we help these kids before they're ever put in that situation? And we do that not by pulling children out of hell, but by pulling hell out of humanity. How do we stop this from happening before it ever gets to that point? And so that's really where we want to take some of our documentaries, some of our films that we're investing in now, is what liberating humanity looks like. And that's why all my social media is liberating humanity, because that's really, it's not about Paul Hutchinson. It's not about the Sound of Freedom. It's about liberating humanity, because that's how we save millions of children.
It's such a great perspective, because as heroic as the work that you and your colleagues did, these kids have still been changed dramatically by the horrors they've gone through. But Paul, thank you so much. We've only just skimmed the surface of the work you did, the heroism, the bravery, the danger that you faced on so many levels just to help these kids. It's just an amazing story. The book is The Sound of Freedom, True Stories That Inspired the Film. Out right now. You can check it out on Amazon.com, of course, or just your favorite bookseller. Thank you so much. Thanks for the work you've done. I look forward to more of your projects, and it's just amazing. I couldn't thank you enough for all the work you've done, and shame on the media for what they did, but boy, a great story, couldn't be stopped. And I'm so glad so many people were able to see it and check it out.
Thank you, Christian. Incredibly grateful for the time with you and your audience.
Your character actor of the week is Joe Pantoliano. Before we wrap up the show, I want to do a couple of quick reviews here. They're just timely stuff. I had some thoughts I wanted to share, and I think a lot of people will be curious about what I'm talking about because they're pretty big on the pop culture landscape. Now, first up is Happy Gilmore 2, the sequel that went straight to Netflix, sign O the Times, and of course, it's a sequel to the movie, and took about 29 or so years to get going. It's been a while since we last saw Happy and Friends, but they are back on Netflix in an all-new movie. Now, the good news is, well, it's better than the trailers. I found the trailers to be weak tea on steroids. Didn't think there was much there. I didn't even laugh at those particular sneak peeks, and that's a problem. Another issue I had with the movie is Julie Bowen, of course, from Modern Family. Now, nothing wrong with Julie Bowen. I think she's a fine comic actress and rather fetching. I tell it to everyone I meet. I don't know why, it's just one of my celebrity crushes. But it was interesting because she is in her 50s and she was part of the original Happy Gilmore film. And she talked recently about how she expected to be replaced in the new film. I mean, she was the love interest. She was Happy Gilmore's love. And the way things work today, the way Hollywood works, you always want to go with a younger, prettier actress. It's so age related. It's so, it's so dismissive of older actresses. She just assumed that she wouldn't be a part of the project. And Adam Sandler said, oh, no, you're a key part of this film. And she was very grateful. It's something that she shared on the promotional circuit for the movie. And I was touched by it because, I'm not woke, but I certainly recognize that Hollywood has some issues when it comes to women and aging. There's plastic surgery. There's recasting for younger, prettier actresses. It's a problem. And when she shared that story, I was rather touched. I thought, even if Happy Gilmore 2 isn't good, I'm so glad that she's in the movie. I'm so glad that they just rejected that trend. Well, mild spoiler alert, they kill her off in 5 minutes. So I gotta say, that one pissed me off. But as that for the movie itself, well, on the good side, it is funny. It is charming. It is true to the spirit of the first film. Adam Sandler understands this character and what we needed to see again. And of course, he's an older fellow at this point. He's got young kids, well, not young kids, but they're kind of teenager-ish. So I think there's a lot of good elements of the film. On the bad side, well, it's 2 hours long. No comedy should be 2 hours long. It's just, comedy should be you get in, you get out, you make us laugh, and you move on. That's just length is an issue. And also, there are so many cameos in here and so many callbacks. It's a bit exhausting. As a matter of fact, I think people moving on will keep watching the original film, but they'll view this as almost like a reunion, like a nostalgia exercise. I don't think people will be quoting this movie or rewatching this movie again and again like the first film. And that makes me a little sad. I mean, I think we want to create new things now and not just celebrate the past. I'm all for celebrating the past. I get the old, tingles when I hear classic songs too, but let's make some great new art at the same time as we're appreciating the old stuff. So
Happy Gilmore has really charged in the back nine.
Let me know if you like it or hate it. You can always email me. It's christian@hollywoodintoto.com. The second thing I wanted to mention is another reboot of sorts, although I got yelled at for using that term on my website. It's King of the Hill. The show was on for, I think, about 13 or so seasons, give or take. It was on for a long time on Fox. It was a very genteel, funny, sweet family sitcom, animated, of course, about a Texas family that was right of center, right leaning, but it wasn't political, but it did treat their culture with respect. So now it's back on Hulu, 10 new episodes debuting August 4th. And I sampled the first 3 and I laughed and I enjoyed it and was pleasantly surprised that creator Mike Judge, who's the co-creator of the show, went there in a way. He poked fun at gender fluidity, at cultural appropriation, kind of mixing it up in a way and using Hank Hill and Friends as sort of the perspective, the lens with which to see some modern changes in society. But again, it wasn't like owning the libs. It wasn't vicious. It wasn't cruel. And it had some empathy for everyone involved. So I think that's the King of the Hill way. Having said all that, I found the episodes just a little dull. Now, Bobby Hill is a little bit older. He's a young man. He owns a restaurant. Hank and Peggy Hill are now retired. So there's lots of interesting comic possibilities here. And they do get into them to a degree. But I just thought it didn't feel compelling to watch. I appreciated it. It felt like, being reunited with old friends, but it just didn't have that grab me situation that I get from the best sitcoms. So it's good to have King of the Hill back. I'm glad Hulu is stuck to the show's core principles. They haven't changed things, haven't reimagined it in any sort of incredibly upsetting way. It's just the King of the Hill. It's sweet, it's gentle, it's disarming. Maybe not must-see television, but certainly enjoyable television. So if you like the original show, I think you'll enjoy this reboot, not reboot, of the show. Well, that's it for the show this week. Again, thank you to Radio America having me as part of their great podcast lineup. Do check out HollywoodInToto.com. It is my website. It is my home base. It is the right take on entertainment, like this particular podcast. And of course, you've got news and reviews and commentary, all the things in pop culture from a right of center point of view. We don't want to push away our center left friends. There's plenty of apolitical stuff to enjoy there as well. But I also think that if you're left of center and you want to see what the right side of Hollywood is all about. That's it. Thank you again for checking this show out and have a wonderful weekend and a great time with friends and family. Doctor's orders.